rise of the monarchs. So the absolute monarch. So a lot of this is going to go down for these reasons. So we have the church loses power after the Reformation, great wealth from the colonies, large armies from constant war, and all lead to rulers with total power. So let's back this up a little because, like I said, I don't actually know how many of y'all had world history, if you had any at all, and that super concerns me. So let's start with the church loses power after the Reformation. Way back in the day, a guy named Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr., he was in civil rights. This guy started way before him, but he did have the same name. So Martin Luther's hanging out in Germany, and he is part of the Catholic Church. He's a priest, and he starts thinking for himself, which is not allowed at all. And he's like, man, I don't think the Bible says some of the things the Catholic Church is saying. And they were like, shh. And he was like, man, right here in the Bible, it says this, like, stop reading the Bible. And the Catholic Church didn't really like this. He didn't really care. He nailed his 99 Thesis up on the church door and started preaching, made the Catholic Church mad. A lot of people were like, hey, we like his way better because there's a printing press now and we can read more and we can read for ourselves. And the Bible is actually translated into German and a couple different languages instead of just Latin. So, now that I've read for myself in my own language, I think he's right. And the Catholic Church was like, dang it! So the Catholic Church, who had all the power in the world because they could literally condemn your soul to hell if they felt like it, now doesn't have the same amount of power because people can read and think for themselves. Isn't it amazing how much learning impacts lives? So we have the Reformations. This is the Protestant Reformation led by Martin Luther, started Lutheranism, Lutheran Church, all that stuff. But that's a major, major player in absolutism because this absolute power of the church no longer has absolute power because there's other options of Christianity. That's very important. So most of this chapter is going to be very religious driven. So that goes to number 3. So this kind of an order. Large armies from constant war. So now the Catholic nations are going to fight a lot with the Protestant nations because the Catholic Church said so. So Catholic churches are going to try to control the land, and they're going to try to push forward and gain more land so that everybody has to be Catholic, and the Protestant princes and things like that are going to rebel so that they don't have to follow the Catholic Church anymore. So it's just constant war, which means large armies, which means you have lots of power because you're the king. And you control the armies. So, flip back to that, we have great wealth from the colonies. This is after the exploration of the world. We have colonies in South America and North America at this point, and they're bringing crazy amounts of raw goods back to Britain and France and Spain, which have never been seen before. And it's bringing tons and tons of money in. So, money, armies, power vacuum, all of this leads to rulers with total power. And total power is legitimate, just they don't have to listen to anybody else. Like, nobles used to be important because it was feudalism, which meant that you had knights and lords and kings, and everybody had an agreement that I give you land, you give me your support. And now they don't need your support because they have an army. They don't need yours anymore. They don't need your knights. They have an army. So we kick back from feudalism and we go to absolute monarchy. Absolutism, absolute power. First one we get is Philip II. It's not even the first one. He's second in the timeline. Anyway, this is all out of order. Philip II is king of Spain, and he gets great wealth from New World colonies. So unlike England, who thought that North America was going to have gold and stuff, it didn't at all. We have hardly any gold. Brazil and Colombia and Peru, Chile, Bolivia, they have tons of gold. Tons. Silver, gold, emeralds, lots and lots of good stuff. So Philip, who owns all of that at this point, is getting crazy rich from his colonies. And to keep his power, he's going to, once again, dip into religion, because that's going to be the driving factor. Don't forget that. The Catholic Inquisition to maintain power. So the Catholic Inquisition is just anytime he thinks that you're a Protestant, you're going to be kidnapped out of your bed at night. You're going to be kept in a really, really cold jail cell with probably no windows and overcrowding. And then they're going to torture you until you confess. This could be confess that you're a witch. Could be confess that you're a werewolf, for crying out loud. It could confess that you just don't believe in God. How dare you? And then they torture you, kill you, and then send your soul to heaven because you confessed. Very, very useful method. Not for, actually sending your soul to heaven. Mostly really useful for keeping people in line because people don't want to die that way. So that's how he controls his power. He is one of my favorite people because he just kind of steps in and just takes other people's thrones. So his uncle was the king of Portugal at the same time, and he was like, hey, and he just didn't have an heir when he died. So he just pranced on over and took over that country too. He's like, oh, you don't have an heir? I noticed that I too am in fact a king, so I will in fact take your spot. I'll do that out of the goodness of my heart. I don't think it was the goodness of his heart. He just wanted more money. Portugal also owned Brazil, which is another major colony with major resources. So now he has that too. He does claim the divine right, which his power comes from God. This is not a new thing in history. Like China claimed that forever. They had the mandate of heaven, which was just like God's will me to be the king. If they did not want me to be the king, they wouldn't have put me here. Same for the European kings now at this point. They're like, hey, if God didn't want me here, he would have me killed, or I would die, or I would never have been here in the first place. So until I am assassinated or die of old age, clearly God wanted me to be king. There is some fault in this logic, but not from the uneducated masses. So they ruled this way for a good long while. Next, and by next I mean first, you had Henry VIII. He's our first absolute monarch, technically. He is the Tudor King of England, not because he's tutoring people in math or English. It is because he's Tudor family. That's his family name. He is going to break with the Catholic Church in order to gain a divorce. So Henry VIII, which he looks pretty dashing in this picture, this is not a really good picture of him, actually, because he actually had like a half-rotting leg because he had an old incident, like he fell off a horse and it didn't heal right. And then he was also extremely overweight because he just liked to eat. He was the third son. The oldest son died in a war. The middle son died of like pneumonia when he was about to take the throne. And Henry gets to be the lucky person to take the throne. He was never meant to. He was basically a spoiled child, and none of that changed when he became an adult. He just became a spoiled adult child. He was married to Catherine of Aragon, who is the Spanish princess, because they are a Catholic nation and they want to make a strong Catholic alliance against all the Protestants and keep the favor of the Catholic Pope, who sends money and pretty much anything else to anybody who remains Catholic. And so that's what they do. And for years and years, they have one little girl. They never have a boy. He has a boy by lots of other women because, well, he's a man whore. So he had lots of children, but not from his real wife, so that didn't work out. And then, lo and behold, swaggers in Anne Boleyn, who is this hussy from France, who's showing too much of her hair and thinks for herself and is very smart and quick-witted. So she basically manipulated him to divorcing his wife, marrying her, by saying, if God wanted you to marry her, he would have given you an heir. Clearly, God didn't want you to do this. And he's like, yeah, sounds great. So he does whatever she says, asks the Pope for a divorce. The Pope was like, heck no, man, we're in the middle of a war against the Protestants. You're not going to make another Catholic nation angry at you. So clearly that didn't work out very well. So he comes back and he tells Anne, he's like, man, they won't give me a divorce. Can you just be my mistress? And she's like, absolutely freaking not. What kind of hussy do you think I am? Divorce your wife. Man up. Grow a pair. She's like, oh, okay, I guess I will. So he breaks from the Catholic Church to get a divorce. He ends up divorcing Anne Boleyn a little later. He ends up beheading her, actually, because he also didn't get a son from her. He got a girl, Elizabeth, and yeah, it didn't really work out very well. So he divorces his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. He beheads Anne Boleyn, his second wife. His third wife, his favorite wife, Jane Seymour, died in childbirth. Finally, to a son. That's probably why she's his favorite. And also, she never really argued with him. She was very, very quiet. He has a very sickly son, James. We'll get back to both of those. His third wife was a German princess because he needs the support of the Lutheran Church because he's going against the Catholics. Once again, everything is driven by religion. So he divorces her because she looked like a horse. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he thought. He was very, very handsome for a 40-year-old with a oozing leg and overweight. Yeah, he wasn't handsome, but he thought himself was. So we have a divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded. His fifth wife, Kitty Howard, was a cousin of Anne Boleyn, and she was an idiot because she was 14. Once again, he's in his 40s. She's 14. She thinks because he can cheat on her, she can cheat on him. That's not how that works at any point in history with King. So she gets beheaded for cheating on him, and then his last wife, thankfully, outlives him. So he has a lot of issues, 6 marriages, and his daughter is going to be the one that takes the throne. So in the English church, the English nation, you had Henry VIII, who took over, James I, who tried to rule, who was weak and not very good because he was basically a kid when his dad died. Didn't work out very well. His sister Mary takes over, who was Catherine of Aragon's daughter. She's Catholic. People didn't like that. They really played up how she was torturing Protestants, even though she really wasn't. But, propaganda, public opinion, things like that. Bunch of lies. They get her taken care of, and Elizabeth takes the throne as a Protestant queen. She solidifies the Church of England, or the Anglican Church, and that's where we're going to leave England for now. We'll get back to them later. You have my favorite absolute monarch next, Louis XIV. He is the Bourbon King of France, not the drink. That's not why he's my favorite. He's my favorite because he was actually a decent human being for the most part. He's called the Sun King because he's awesome. He was that good, even though he looks really comfy in his Snuggie. That's what that picture looks like. He looks like he's wearing a Snuggie. He states, L'Estat c'est moi. Which I hope somebody took French and knows that's a horrible pronunciation, but I got you. I am the state. He is France. He is everything because he is an absolute ruler. He doesn't have to ask permission. He is France. He changed a lot of laws. He's the reason that we have dull knives at the dinner table. You can't have steak knives. You have the little dinner knives that are flat, like butter knives. It's because of him, because he wanted people to stop killing each other with knives at the dinner table. He basically civilized France. So, upped education, upped research, upped science. He wanted to civilize France. That's why there were a cultural revolution, a cultural hotspot for really up until modern day. There's still a really big cultural center because of this guy right here with a Snuggie. His one downfall is he decides he's going to build the Palace of Versailles, which is basically bankrupts France. It's massive. It's incredible. It's amazing to walk through. It's still around, but it is a money drain. It makes any house in America look like a joke. So 2,300 rooms, 550,000 square feet, 6,000 paintings, 2,000 sculptures. That's the courtyard. All of those tiles are marble, and literally that's where horses walk. It's not even for the people. Horses are being walked on there. It's farm animals. The benefit of this palace, which was a little outside of Paris, means you're not getting diseases because you're outside of the city. And he basically held his nobles captive there. He was like, hey, you can't rebel or argue with me if you're stuck in this house with me. You can't plot. Also, I'm going to have all these important meetings there, and I'm not going to invite you because I want you to know your place. So he is awesome. MTV Crib style. We have the Hall of Mirrors, which is all gold and marble and hand-painted ceilings and giant mirrors, which were exceptionally expensive back in the day because they're backed with silver and glass, which doesn't lend well to massive pieces at the time. So this is an incredible work of art, hand-done chandeliers. Some poor servant had to light all those candles. It was awful. You have the king's bedroom, which is, once again, all gold. Shiny. If you notice the guardrail there, it's not put up for the museum. It's put up because that's what people would come watch him get ready in the morning, which is super creepy, but apparently a honor back in the day to get to know people and watch things. Watch him wake up in the morning, watch him brush his teeth. Yeah, it's odd to us, but that was a very important part of their day. The queen's bedroom, separate bedrooms. You don't want people to know that you sleep together, even though you have children. All gold, once again, marble, gold, hand-painted walls, very elaborate, very pretty. The royal chapel, such nice marble that it's shiny and reflective. And once again, gold, marble pillars, hand-carved. It's no expense spared. And then the gardens, which were actually my favorite place when I went there. I'm an outside person, so the gardens were incredibly beautiful. You would just stroll around, walk, and be like, such a beautiful day. Hope the peasants are doing okay out there, starving to death in the streets. So that's not even all of it. This is all of it. All of it. It goes way back over there. There's all these viewing pools and fancy ponds and not corn mazes, hedge mazes, I guess, bush mazes, I don't know, mazes you can go get lost in. It's really cool. It's a cool place. Next, we have Peter the Great, Russia. He looks kind of Russian. He is the Tsar of Russia. Tsar just means king. He westernizes Russia. So he also is not a bad person. Louis XIV is my favorite, but he's pretty close in line. He westernizes Russia. So what, if you remember from geography, Russia starts in Europe and ends in Asia. It's massive. It's the largest country in the world, but not the largest population because there's not actually that much livable space there. It's all forests and Siberia, tundra is. It's not the best place to live. But they tended to take after more of the Mongols and that type of people for the most part until he realizes that Europe is getting rich off their colonies and off trade, and we would like to get on this bandwagon. So he makes them more like Europe. He simplifies their alphabet, which used to be Cyrillic, and it was very complicated, and you had to know a lot of individual symbols. Instead, he made it where it was a little more standardized, a little easier to follow. He made newspapers so you can share the news, because education is important. Like, things you're going to learn in world history. Land equals money equals power, and education means you don't get used and abused by your government. So stop complaining about being educated. So he educates his people with newspapers. He gives them things. He tells them what's happening in the world, what's happening in their own country, what's happening in politics. He wants them to know so they can have opinions, so they can, like, be useful citizens. And then he moves the capital to St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is on the sea, so it's a better trade route. Before, I think it's Moscow is their original capital, and it is in the middle of European Russia, which is not on a major river. It's not necessarily on a major trade route. It's kind of out of the way, so nobody really wanted to come trade with him. So if you move to St. Petersburg, you have an immediate way to get to the rest of Europe. Trade is better, cheaper, more effective. So he did some good stuff. And that's it. Now you know about our major monarchs.